if my truth is too much for you to handle and it causes us to no longer have a relationship, then that's the price my truth is going to pay. And I'm not sacrificing that anymore in my life. And that was a big deal to say, and I haven't lost anyone.
I remember a time when I would go to my therapist and I'd sit across from the couch from said therapist, and it felt like you were so separated from them, right? It was like you were on one side, they were on the other, and it was that whole very Freudian thing of tell me your feelings, right? And you share an hour, you leave, that's that, you come back the next week. Boom, that's it. You know nothing about them. But in today's world, we see the human side of therapy and therapists. We see that they're supporting our emotional well-being, but they're also on their own journey, as we all are, because it takes us to a different level when we're connecting in that way, a connection that brings us together as human beings. And when you think about Dr. Frank Anderson, he is known for internal family systems. He is known for his book, Transcending Trauma, both those books actually. But as an author, a psychiatrist, a therapist, a speaker, a trauma specialist, and someone who's been dealing with neuroscience for over 30 years, and you know I get nerdy on the neuroscience, he's here to share his story, his personal story, To Be Loved, a story of truth, trauma, and transformation. And Frank, it is such a pleasure to have you on Holistically Speaking. I was getting a little giddy planning for this conversation because I've been following your path for a long time. And I just have to say yay to those therapists like you that are willing to put it out there and say, you know what? I've got a story too.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
So the big question I have, and I feel like those who have not had the opportunity to read this book yet, and I know we have listeners who are either reading it or have read it, but there are some who haven't. I think the first question, which you actually share in the book, is what made you share a memoir and open your entire life up to be between the pages of black and white, told in your own voice if you get the audio version, and really be that vulnerable and share who you are when you do the work that you do?
It's a great question. And I've always, throughout my whole career, have had this agenda to break this us and them barrier, honestly. And this was like the pinnacle of that, to tell you the truth. But I remember, early on working with Bessel van der Kolk at his trauma center, starting in 1992. And, I was a white male at that point, straight psychiatrist, working with primarily women who had trauma histories. And the power differential as the psychiatrist giving women pills to put in their body was a big problem. It was huge. I was like, this is not going to work. And, the us and them always felt uncomfortable to me. I'm like, wait a minute, we're much more alike than we are different, right? And I grew up in a very kind of dominant, controlling, patriarchal kind of family system in the Midwest, where the man was in power and in charge. So I also had my own personal reaction to that, which I really didn't like. So I've been one of these people. I remember Bessel van der Kolk did a conference. He's been doing a conference for 35 years. I speak at it frequently. Mm-hmm. And one year he did a survivors conference. I thought that was so brilliant. I was like, why don't we have more of these? There are all these experts sitting up at the damn podium, pretending like they're here to help you. I'm like, give me a break. I know all these people. They all have their own damn trauma histories. Why do we need to pretend like we're the expert and you're the one with the trauma history? Because it's not true. And so I had that view for a long time. But as I started doing more and more workshops on my own, I was like, I could say what I want. I'm like, hi, I'm Frank Anderson. I'm gay and I have a trauma history. Nice to meet you. Like, it was kind of like that. I really had that view. And so when I wrote Transcending Trauma, which was primarily during the pandemic, I would put these little snippets of my own personal stories. I wrote stories about clinical vignettes when I wrote Transcending Trauma, because it really is IFS trauma and neuroscience, kind of book. but I would put clinical vignettes. And I just wanted to throw a little bit of me into this book too, even though it was an academic book. And it was interesting. Once the book got released, the publisher was like, let's have a meeting. I'm like, okay, fine. Like, I think they're wanting to tell me how the book's doing from a sales perspective. And instead, they're the ones that said, we think you should write a memoir. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, me? Like, I'm a psychiatrist. Like, I don't write a memoir. Like, what do you mean? So it was it took me off guard. But I also, in that moment, really remember, clear as day, I had this repetitive dream that just kept, and it was just words. It was just words. The moments that made you, the moments that made you, the moments that made you. And I was like, oh, it's just like there was a confluence of their suggestion and that dream that I had, which I very much believe in, the information that I get from beyond to help me in this journey and to help the world. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I get it. Yes. I even said at the time, I may even have the title, The Moments That Made Me. We ended up obviously with To Be Loved instead of The Moments That Made Me, but it made sense to me in that moment. It's like, oh, I do have a story to tell, and I'm going to tell a collection of my moments in a way to help people heal. It was always about helping people heal through my story. When I started writing it, I was like, holy crap, like there's a lot in here. Like nobody really reviews your life, in that kind of way. It's not like a common thing we do. And as I started collecting my moments, I was like, wow. So I was really surprised how the story wove together when I started writing about moments. And it really was a list of moments and then a list of the story of each moment and then how they came together to tell the story of my life from a trauma perspective, more importantly, from the journey of healing.
Yeah, this is such a vulnerable book. Like we all have shit, right? We all have stuff in our family. 100%. We all have baggage, right? It just depends. Some of us have it that can be stored in the seat pocket in front of us. Some of it could be in the overhead compartment. Some of us need to check it, right? And the way you share this story of your life, I mean, I really feel like I'm with you on the journey from this Chicago Italian family from the early stages. And I get it, that Gen X period too, but you even go back further to explain like your ancestry, because that generational trauma comes with it too. And then just like moving along, and it honestly, Frank, it's like a movie, and it needs to be a movie.
Well, a couple things I'll say about that. Number one is, the more I wrote the book, the more important truth became. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't planning to write such a raw, emotionally vulnerable book. Like that wasn't the agenda, right? The more I wrote, the more important it was for truth to be known, because we hold so much internally around our perception and our experience, and rarely do we get the chance to be heard and known and seen in that way. So it became more important. I kept a phrase through writing the book was the truth through love and compassion, because I didn't want to attack anybody. I didn't want to trash anyone. This wasn't like poor me, Frank Anderson, poor Frankie, look at these horrible people. This was the complexity of all of us, but the truth in a loving, compassionate way. So that was very important for me in writing this book. And same thing that you said when I was reading, I was like, damn, this could be a movie. Like, damn, this could be a movie, right? And the other thing around that issue, which was shocking, but now makes sense in retrospect, is the last third of the book was written in real time. So I was like, people write a memoir about their life. Like, I'm not 80. I haven't won a Nobel Peace Prize. Like, why am I writing a memoir? And then my life unfolded to support the memoir, not the other way around. My life unfolded in this amazing way around the end of my father's life and the healing journey that I experienced that was helping to support this story being told. So it was the opposite, which was amazing to write in real time like that and to have my life unfold that supports this, I can say this, pretty spectacular story which is in fact going to become a movie. Like it really is. I always have that as a fantasy in the back of my mind, like, oh my God, would that be amazing? And partly because it'll reach more people that way. The books reach so many people,
Yes,
and movies reach so many people. And so I've had colleagues and friends out here in LA, where I'm living right now for the summer, who were really moved by it. And I have a production company called Trauma Informed Media now. And this woman, who's an amazing writer and director, is like, I would be honored to write the screenplay for this and to be the director if you'll have me. And I'm like, if I'll have you, like, are you kidding?
Sign me up.
Yeah, so we're working on funding and writing the screenplay, and I'm so excited. I'm really so excited to get the story out to as many people as possible. Like, we all deserve to be loved.
Yeah.
Everybody has trauma, and it can be healed. So I'm thrilled about it. I'm thrilled.
I'm on board with that. And it's interesting that we're sitting here, we're able to laugh about it. Part of one thing I always talk about in the trauma field is that we need to find the humor in the healing. Like we need to be able to laugh at things. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It doesn't mean you're laughing off something or making fun of. But if we don't see the humor in how we heal ourselves, where in the world are we going to even go? And so sitting here and telling your story, and by the way, I want to get into it a little bit because there are a lot of very sensitive topics in this story of your life, which is, there's still more. I imagine maybe there might be a second book because we haven't gotten there yet, right? But you touch on some very personal topics with your family. And, the big question I would think people might ask is, how can you tell this story like this and talk about some of these people that you love in your family and the abuse, and they're still on the planet, or even if they're not, there's people who know them and this could impact them. Yep. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, that was that was and still is a powerful experience. Yeah. Let me say that. And that was one of the reasons. So like I worked with 3 editors throughout the process of writing the book, and I'd write a passage, and then they'd come back with all these edits that were so mean and nasty, and I would undo it. They're like, "Hey, he's such an asshole," and I'm like, "No, we're not calling my father an asshole. That is not happening." Like, I was undoing all of their anger around what they felt by reading these passages, which was really interesting. So I was like, no, I'm not. I'm going to tell the truth from a kind place. Like, again, that was so, so important. And it's my story. It's not anybody else's. Right. So my mother, my brother, my sisters, my cousins, I changed everybody's names mostly. So I didn't use, some people, like my husband, my oldest son's like, I want you to use my name. I'm like, okay, fine. My brother, I want you to use my name. But I knew that telling this story would be very difficult for my parents. And it was interesting. I've had a range of, I tried to protect my ex-wife, all the people in my life, because I'm not interested in harming them. And this is my story, not theirs. Right. But I also was done self-sacrificing in the service of somebody else's feelings and needs. Okay.
Here, there.
That was a huge piece. Yeah. And I had a very powerful discussion with my mom, because most of my life, Frankie sacrificed himself in the service of the connection with everyone. And I was like, I can't do that anymore. And I'm not going to do that anymore. And, we do that because we want to preserve a relationship, and we're afraid of being abandoned and alone. And I don't hold that anymore. I've healed enough. And I've said, look, if my truth is too much for you to handle and it causes us to no longer have a relationship, then that's the price my truth is going to pay. And I'm not sacrificing that anymore in my life. And that was a big deal to say, and I haven't lost anyone. Has it been hard for people to read this? Yes. Some of my cousins were like, Frank, I had no idea. Oh my goodness. If we thought you were the perfect family. We wanted to be like you. I am so sorry that was happening behind closed doors. We had no idea. My brother is like, he's 2 years younger than me. He's like, it is all true. I was there for every single moment. Everything you're saying is true. And my younger sisters had no clue. They're like, we didn't know that was going on. Like, they were raised in a different family, so to speak, because I had therapy. My parents were in therapy very early on. I was in therapy since I was 6 years old. And so it was somewhat of a different family as we got older. So my sisters were kind of surprised. My younger sister, who always kind of judged me for my relationship with my dad, understood it now for the first time in her life. She's like, wow, Frank, I had no idea. You had a very different upbringing than I did. Now we're much closer because she understands some of the backstory, which she never knew before.
And maybe that could bring a level of understanding that she didn't have
100%.
before.
100%.
I mean, give people the benefit of the doubt, but you're right. You're living your truth. And that's a hard thing to do, especially when we're talking about generational trauma, internal family systems, which I'd love to just touch on real quick, because there might be some folks that are tuning in that might not know what that is. And that's something that you've been talking about for a very long time.
Yeah.
And this book is like a case study for it.
For those of you out there who are old enough to know this reference, it's like the commercial around, I'm not only the hair club president, I'm the member.
Also the client.
I'm also the member, right? A little bit of that. I mean, Dick Schwartz is the founder of the IFS model.
Yeah.
But I've been teaching it, and I created the trauma curriculum for it. I've been teaching it for a really long time, over 20 years. And so, but it transformed my life. Like, I healed, I was in therapy earlier on in my residency at Harvard 5 times a week for 11 years. And that was psychoanalytic therapy. And that gave me awareness, but it didn't help me heal. And IFS really did help me heal trauma in a way that's no longer carrying the energy of it. So it's been profound for me. And it's not the only model that helps heal trauma. That I'm clear about. It isn't. Yeah. It's one of them, and it worked for me. And I'm much more focused on integrating trauma treatment now. I wrote the book 3 ways. First, from my perspective, as the way I saw it. Then I rewrote the whole book from Frankie's perspective. The whole story I wrote through his perspective. And then the third version was putting the 2 of those together. So it really is a combined effort of me and me as a little kid, and a teenager, and in college, and, in medical school. Like, I wanted people to be there with me, right, through the experience. And so writing it that way helped the immediacy of people joining me in that journey.
Another thing that I think really bonds people is music. You bring that up in your book. Yes. I loved this because music is such a connection. And while you're just saying what you were sharing there about the younger Frankie and the present day Frank, the idea of the song Bohemian Rhapsody, when you were talking about that. And I feel like I was today years old when it just came to me, that whole mama, I just killed a man. I imagine most people think it's about killing somebody else, but it's killing a part of yourself. And I'm like, oh, did I just learn something new? I'm like, I just learned the meaning of the lyrics from listening to Be Loved. But it was but it connected me on a level, because we are always trying to connect with our inner child, right? Yeah. But we also are trying to, that part of us that can no longer exist, that isn't helping us in the process, that we need to let go of, right?
Well, let me say this, the part of us that carries the pain and trauma that we need to let go of. We don't want to kill any parts, really. We kill what they're carrying because it oppresses us and doesn't allow us to be our authentic self. But oh my goodness, music is so important to me, so important to me. A lot of people write books and put these famous, quotes in the beginning of all these very high intellectual people, Aristotle and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. That's not who Frank Anderson is. I'm like, I love music. And I had to do a lot of convincing to the publisher. I'm like, please, please, please. What is the To Be Loved's playlist? And partly because it was the truth. Like I listened to each one of those songs thousands of times when I run, thousands of times, to the point now, like Adele's To Be Loved, which is towards the end of the book, my my family will not let me play this song in the house anymore. Like
Like
you
you're cut
go
off.
outside and you go to the hot tub and you listen to Be Loved as many times as you want, but we can't hear it another time. Like it's kind of like that.
So basically, Frank got a timeout.
You got to come out with To Be Loved, but like really, like Carrie Underwood's Blown Away, every tear-soaked whiskey memory blown away. Like these Kid Fears by the Indigo Girls, you know, like I lived all that, you know, even Eminem's like the power of coming back and fighting, you know, like all these songs I had real, like I was somebody, because of the programming I experienced early on in my life, to be disconnected from who I was. So music allowed me to connect to my feelings in a way that I didn't have access to for many, many years. So it really saved me in that way, because it allowed me through the music, and music makes us feel so much, to feel, because I didn't have access to emotion for a long time. Now I cry at the drop of the hat. And I'm so happy about that. Like, I'm so happy that I have access to my emotions in that way.
Yeah.
But I didn't back then. And music helped me connect to stuff I couldn't put words to.
I've never seen that done in a book before. I thought it was brilliant. And as someone who comes from that background, like I grew up as a theater kid. I listened to lyrics. It was poetry to me. It still is. I listen to something and I'm like, I know what that means. You know, like get very emotional. But because you connect to it, and then you having the title of a song and the name of the songwriter or the band or whoever it is at the beginning of each chapter, and then you talked about creating a playlist for To Be Loved. I was like, this is brilliant. And then I started thinking about the movie, and I'm thinking, oh wow, he's going to have to get a lot of rights to a lot of songs.
Well, you know what I was thinking when I was writing? I was like, look, screenwriter, director, I've done the work for you ahead of time. Here's the music that goes with the story. Like you don't have to search for them. I've already come up with it. So
it's brilliant.
Do, right? Who knows what they'll do? But those songs, you know, were very meaningful in each chapter. You know, each chapter for sure.
And even taking it to a different level, where you just said you take them on the run with you. So you're like in motion healing.
Yes.
You know, there's this whole other level to it. So I really love that. What was the hardest part about writing this book? Because you're talking about misogyny, you're talking about the mafia, you're talking about mental health. I'm going with all these like alliterations. Your siblings, sexual abuse, so much is covered. And some things that could potentially embarrass other people. But what was the hardest thing for you?
Hard is not a word that I resonate with. I will say emotionally impactful, right? It wasn't hard to write this because I kept telling my husband, I would wake up at 3:00 in the morning, many, many days, because my mind was just exploding with ideas. Stuff was coming to me and I couldn't contain it. So it was like, right. And it was like the kids woke up and they went to school at 7 or 8 o'clock, and I'd been working for 5 or 6 hours already. Like I would get up in the middle of the night. So it was, and I love writing. I've never thought of myself as a writer ever. And I loved this process, you know, writing academic stuff, footnoting, and it's got to be accurate and correct. This is like telling your story. Like, so I was like, I wish I had an advance that I could take 2 years off and write full time. You know what I mean? It was so beautiful. So I loved it. What was impactful was the healing that occurred for me along the journey, because I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to heal so much. I was writing this for other people to learn about healing, but so much of my healing, so much healing happened to me through writing it. I'll tell you two things. One was, and this was a shock for me, I always had thought I was sexually abused, but I didn't have any memories, so I wasn't really sure what that was about. Like I would never make up a false memory. I was clear about that. And so I was like, I didn't understand that. But as I wrote this book, it hit me like a ton of bricks. the overexposure I had as a little kid
Mm-hmm.
to all things sexual created the scenario of me feeling violated. And I wasn't physically violated, I was emotionally violated. And nobody did anything to me, but the experience I grew up with was this overwhelming sexual violation of way more of what I was exposed to than I should have been exposed to. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my goodness, here it is. And I felt it so profoundly. I was like, this is why I am grossed out about all things sexual. This is why I have such difficulty. It's because of what I did experience as a violation at a little kid's perspective. So
Yeah.
that was very powerful for me to kind of put those pieces together. The second was the process of forgiveness with my father around his passing. Like I did not expect. I mean, therapists doesn't even talk about forgiveness.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is such a taboo word. It's like, everybody's forced to forgive prematurely. Like, so I've learned so much about forgiveness. And I'll never forget the moment during my dad's funeral, which I arranged, that I felt love for him. And I was like, I am so free of what happened to me that I can feel love for someone who harmed me. And that was really powerful. I will always hold that experience with me in my life. So there were some very powerful moments that changed my life
Yeah.
in ways therapy never could have or did.
That's a very powerful moment that believe a lot of people experience, that guilt of somebody passing, or the feeling of not having resolution, or I wish I said
Yeah.
this, or I should have said that. And I felt that because, I mean, knowing that you're standing at someone's grave, or not, if you had upset and you're not there, can be, stays with you. And the forgiveness is really, if we're going to use the word, is really about you.
Yes,
Right? It's about you. It's not about the other person. So
100%. Yes.
with that in mind, what would be your wisdom or advice to somebody who's tuning in that might have some kind of a ruptured relationship with someone close, be it a parent, if they are struggling with that moment, not being able to have the resolution?
Here's what I learned through the journey is heal your own trauma first and then work on the relational piece with the
Yeah.
person who harmed you. Like sometimes we lump them together, and sometimes people want people to forgive before they've healed. Like a lot of religious institutions talk about forgiveness, but they don't talk about healing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we're forced as a culture. That's why people have such an allergic reaction to the word, because it's forced prematurely. What I learned through my experiences, you have to release what you're carrying around what happened to you first. Then, with more energetic clarity, you can focus on the relational piece as a choice or not with the person who harmed you. So they're two different things. And there's an order now that I've learned that I teach, so that it's not done prematurely, so that it's not thrust or forced upon somebody, so that it happens in an authentic way. And like you said, for the person doing the forgiving, not for the person being forgiven.
Mm-hmm. Whether they're on this planet or not.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of folks out there that I imagine are trying and trying and trying to find resolution or repair the relationship. And I mean, both parties have to be involved in the whole thing.
Yeah.
And what you say about going within first and healing this is really, the things that you're upset about might not actually impact you as much when you realize
Yes.
you're vibrating at a higher level,
100%. So you approach the whole discussion around forgiveness from a very different place.
Yeah.
What ends up happening in the work that I do with clients, and they're surprised by this, is once they've healed their wound and then they explore this possibility of forgiveness or not, they end up seeing the wound in the perpetrator. They see the
Yeah.
humanity. It's like, and I did that too. I was like, it was like part of my forgiveness journey was like, oh my goodness, my dad was so fragile. My dad was so broken himself. I could see that now. I don't even know if how much of what he did was actually even about me.
Right.
And it was more about him and his fragility and his limitations. And so there was this differentiation that happened for me through the process that was like, oh, okay, that's him.
Yeah.
And he's limited and I'm good and that's okay. So there was that piece of differentiation that was super important that I didn't expect.
Yeah. I remember a number of years ago, I took, and I know you're going to know that, like Landmark Forum, right? I
Yeah.
took Landmark
Yeah.
Forum, and you're
Yeah.
perfect just the way you are. You're perfectly imperfect. And, I was in my mid 20s or something, and this is going back. And, fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, we all have our stuff, right?
Yeah.
And the moment I started realizing that if I look at this person, like my mom, who I love dearly, and see the injured or the wounded child, or maybe what's her story, or where does the trauma come from before her, or before my dad or my grandparents or whatever, suddenly you have this sense of compassion for that person, and you're like, gosh, they're doing the best they can with the tools they have. And again, you find that you are healing more of you by having much more compassion and awareness that we're all just walking each other home, right?
Well, and if you do that prematurely, you gloss over the impact of what they had
Yeah.
done to you. You know what I mean? So that piece is important.
Yeah.
But yes, this had a profound impact on me. And yes, they are limited in their capacity. So if you do that work first, you bypass the impact it has on you. You know what I mean? So both are important, but I'm really very clear about don't just, oh, my mom, because I hear this a lot. My mom was grown up in an abusive environment, so therefore my abuse doesn't matter.
Right. Or they're off the hook.
It's justified or they're off the hook. And I'm like, no. Deal with the impact first, then deal with the forgiveness second.
But be open to the fact that there's always room for change. We're always in motion, right? So I love that. Just to stop for a second, I just want to remind folks, if you're wondering who Dr. Frank Anderson is, he is so well known in the field of trauma. He has 2 amazing books, or 3 now, 2 that you might be familiar with, The Internal Family Systems and then Transcending Trauma. And now, with all that knowledge, he's sharing his own personal experience and sharing his personal memoir, although I don't know if there's a non-personal memoir, so that might be, you know what I'm saying.
That would be a biography, right?
Yeah, right.
Now I know the difference, right? Exactly.
Right. So latest book that came out just recently in May of 2024, which is To Be Loved, A Story of Truth, Trauma, and Transformation. We're going to put all of that in the podcast notes so you can grab any of those books. I highly recommend it. I'm going to say this just from personal, get the audiobook. I love listening to you share your story, Frank. You, in your voice, listening to you share it as though I'm sitting across the couch from you and you're like, listen, Hil, this happened. And I'm just like, what? So thank you for that. Thank you for being so authentic with it too, because as I mentioned to you when we were chit-chatting before, the thing that I really love about it is that it seems so organic and authentic. It doesn't seem like you went to some big sound studio, and it sounds great. I'm not saying that. It just sounded like you pressed record and let it go.
Well, and it was interesting to do, because I had never done that before. Like, with Transcending Trauma, hired this company and they had their best writer read it, and he did a beautiful job and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, how could anybody read this? Like, that doesn't even make sense to me. So I'm so glad that they recommended it. And it was so surprising. I remember reading, and it was like, I added all the emotion because I was like, I was there for that. I know what that felt like. Like because I was kind of living it. And I would get angry when I'd read certain things, and I'd be like laughing when I would read other things. So it was really a joy that I didn't expect reading it. It was so much fun because I did live it I relived it, not re-experienced the trauma, but was able to tell the story verbally, which is very different than writing. So it was fun to do. And I'm so glad that it resonated with you in that way, because that was my hope. I was like, gosh, I can't, this is a great story. I can't wait to listen,
Yeah.
It's how it felt when I was reading, when I was like, sharing it with people.
How was it for you when you first heard it? Have you listened to the whole thing on audio?
No, I have not.
Oh,
No.
you want me to tell you how it is? You want me to tell you how it ends?
Tell me how it ends. That's exactly right. I'm dying to know.
Spoiler alert, I won't tell you. You'll have to see the movie. I absolutely loved it. And I imagine you listened to some of the playback though, yeah?
Yeah.
Just to hear.
Absolutely.
How was that for you to listen to yourself?
It's always weird. Like it's weird when I watch myself on TV. I'm doing a lot of TV press now. And to tell you the truth, it's becoming more natural because I'm becoming more natural in all the ways that I'm doing it. So it's not as weird as it used to be, because the more practice I get, the more authentic I feel, So the reading of the book felt really authentic. So I love that it comes across that way, because I was really telling the story in the way that I experienced it. So that felt pretty natural in a way. It really did.
So for someone who's been through therapy since you're 6, was it something that you thought, I mean, you're a great tennis player. That seems to be, tennis is the sport of choice. You love to run, you love music. Was that the area you wanted to go into?
Lord, no. Oh, like, no. It totally makes sense in retrospect, right? It totally makes sense in retrospect. I grew up in a very insular family. It was like, my dad was a pharmacist. My uncle was a doctor. My mom was a nurse. That's what you're going to do. Like, you're going to, and for many years, how I put myself through college, worked at my dad's pharmacies, 80 hours a week, right, to pay for my college education. So I always just thought that's what I was going to do. You're going to be a pharmacist just like your dad, because here it is, And it was interesting, and I write about this. It was a huge moment for me when I was in college. I was loving school so much, and I decided to go into medicine instead of pharmacy, because my dad flunked out of medical school. His brother was the famous doctor named Frank, right? So I remember the Christmas when I came home for Christmas break in college, and like, Dad, I want to become a doctor instead of a pharmacist. I thought he was going to kill me. I really thought he was going to kill me. And I was terrified to share that story with him. And he handled it better than I thought. I was kind of shocked, because I thought I was going to threaten him and his value and worth by kind of, as he says, going into the ultimate of healthcare professions. That was his view of becoming a doctor. And I was like, oh my God, he's going to hate me even more now. No, I didn't think I would be a therapist. And it really was my neighbor, Mateo, his kind of psychotic break that really had a huge impact on me. I didn't know I was resonating with the level of pain he was experiencing at the time. I just had this like, oh my goodness, I have to help people like that. So that was one of my moments, is seeing him in a bipolar episode that just tore me apart from a heart level. The second, which was such a surprise, was watching the movie Ordinary People in college. Right? Like I watched that movie, and I was like, it was this, oh my goodness, I want to be Judd Hirsch. And oh my goodness, I am Timothy Hutton. Like I really felt the duality of this teenage kid who was traumatized and desperate for help, and the profound wisdom and intuned nature of the therapist working with this kid. So those two things really shifted I was going to be a pediatrician when I decided to die. I love kids. I've always loved kids. Of course I'm going to be a pediatrician. Like, that's a no-brainer. So these two moments impacted me. And now, I didn't know at the time, it was all about my healing. It was
Mhm.
all about my own trauma history, but I didn't know it at the time for sure.
I love that you bring up the reference with Ordinary People. What a
Yeah,
movie before, like so ahead of its time. We didn't talk about that stuff.
100%.
And you sit there, you're like, do I know somebody like this? Do I have a friend? But that leads me to ask you a question now that you're
Yeah.
thinking about and the movie rights.
Yeah.
Who would play Frankie and Frank, Dr. Frank? I gotta know. I gotta know.
It's so funny you asked this. Oh my goodness. Like this is so, it's so strange. So one person asked me this before and I'm like, I don't really know. They're like, oh, bull crap. Of course you've been thinking about it. Like, who are you? Come on. Well, here's this thing. I think Bradley Cooper.
Mm.
I think Bradley Cooper should play me. I don't know why. I have a weird affiliation with him in my trauma informed media. He might be a good person to hold that complexity. One of the things that the screenwriter, she's so good at knowing the complexity and the nuances of psychological and emotional stuff. And I personally really want an actor that can hold that complexity. And he does a lot of
Mhm.
mental health kind of related movies. So, I'm not touting my own horn, but I think he'd be really good.
I'll stand behind that one.
This just popped into my head. I'm going to say this.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is true or not, but there's also the Neil Patrick Harris.
That's
Right?
funny. When I was listening to you,
Yeah.
I'm like, I totally could see
That's
that.
another person that just popped into my head is Neil Patrick Harris that, played this straight character in the movies all, for years in the sitcom, came out in his life. So that's another person that I think, might be, I want a lot of care to go into this from a healing perspective. Like the message is about healing.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure it's not just, a big Hollywood name as much as somebody who gets the nuances around healing.
Someone that really connects with the importance of talking about mental health and being okay with some of the stories. It's not just an actor playing a part.
100%.
Someone that sees a little bit of themselves in the story
Yeah.
you're telling, even if it's a completely different story and journey.
100%.
Absolutely.
And
Love those choices.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
But here's the big question.
Yeah.
Like, here's the even bigger question. Not just you, but like our moms and dads, can you see other characters from like who would play mom? Who would play dad?
That's a good question. I haven't gone there.
Yeah.
Jamie Lee Curtis is someone who is, I just think about the intensity of the roles that she plays. I mean, she's got this capacity to go places that feels really powerful. Boy, this is fascinating. I have to tell you, this is a fascinating process. Partly I'm saying this, James Gandolfini, who's no longer with us.
I know.
He would be brilliant as my dad. I'm working with someone who worked with him years and years and years producing The Sopranos. So a person like that, I think casting is going to be everything. That's so interesting that you're asking that question.
I think it's because I had this really healthy relationship with, I love mafia stories and movies. So like when you got into that, I was like, I could really see the movie because I'm the gal that like loved all the mafia stuff. I have Italian background but I also have the Jewish background. So I loved movies like Once Upon a Time in America. And then I love that movie. And then the Sopranos, Boardwalk Empire kind of thing, So I'm sitting there like casting it in my head while I'm listening to it.
That's beautiful. I
might be your best advocate for this whole thing.
I'm going to reach out to you when we start casting for the movie.
It's so amazing. Yeah. And it's all part of the process. And I imagine also when you are doing the movie and watching it and having the process happening, like being outside of it and seeing it happen, that's next level therapy right there.
This is one of the things that the producer and the screenwriter right now, I trust them so implicitly. And I didn't even realize that was even an important thing because I've never done anything like this before. But in the ways that I know them, I'm like, I trust my life with these people. I trust this story. They're so thoughtful and brilliant around the way they're conceiving this and putting it together that I was like, wow, what a gift. Oftentimes what happens is you put a screenplay together and then a studio buys it and you lose all control, And so I'm learning that there's different ways to do this where you can have some, I would have to be executive producer. Otherwise, I'm not going to sign on the line for anything.
Look at you all Hollywood already.
Really, because I want to have an influence.
Yeah.
And not because big famous movie star Frank Anderson. No, because this is really important to me to get this message around the nuances of pain, healing, the way we've all been harmed, and the way we all harm. Like that's important to me. So I want that. I don't want this to be popular to sell as much as impactful for people to learn. I mean, yeah, if it sells, great, but that's not the primary motivator. It really isn't.
I can totally tell that. I can see it's coming from that truly authentic space where we get to a point in our lives where we just want to be happy and do well and heal and be loved.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And we want to be love and share love and give love and get love. I mean, it's as simple as that, And once we do that healing, we see how simple it can be. I mean, life is always a little challenging, but who was it that said this? I remember hearing this a while ago, that you don't want to be the richest person in the cemetery kind of thing either. And that the currency of being rich, I don't just mean money. I mean, keeping it all to yourself, keeping it inside. Yeah. You don't want to be the richest person. You want to give that away, Yeah. So everything you share is just so beautiful. I love this. I'm so invested in this book. It seriously is. Every time I get in the car, I'm like, play.
Great. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
And I've been sharing it too. And we are going to share it on Hilistically Speaking. Like I said, I'm going to put the links in the podcast notes so you can grab the book, whether you want to read it, highlight it, read it again, listen to it, whatever your choice is. It'll be a big smorgasbord. I'm going to share all the books actually, but mainly we're talking about To Be Loved. But before we go, because you're a fun guy, so I love this. I love it. I do a game that is called Rapid Fire, and basically I write down some words that we have been discussing, but words you've said. And I know we're doing a little word association. And you're going to come back with the first word that comes to mind. It's rapid. Boom, bop, beep. Okay?
Yeah.
Ready? Like volleying that tennis ball. Okay, here we go. Mafia.
Fear.
Movie.
Love.
Abuse.
Terror.
Survivor.
Resilience.
Italian.
Joy.
Trauma.
Stuck.
Harm.
Harmful.
Music. Did I say music?
Joy.
Compassion.
Open-hearted.
Healing.
Freedom.
Okay, one more word. Freedom.
Alignment.
That's awesome. Love.
Everything.
Yeah. That's it right there. That is it. Final thoughts that you might want to share with those tuning in to Hilistically Speaking.
Everybody has trauma. We've all gone through stuff. I think that's why we're here. Everybody's harmed. I think the more we pay attention to that, the less we other people, because there's too much othering in this world. And healing is possible for everyone. And I want people to have that message more than anything else.
Beautiful. Love that. Thank you so much for being here and sharing this time.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure. Grab this episode, my friend. To Be Loved, a story of truth, trauma, and transformation. I put all the information you need in the podcast notes of this episode with Dr. Frank Anderson. And you can even connect with him, follow him on social media, find out what he has going on, because there's a lot coming on the To Be Loved journey. I can tell you that. And if you have been touched, moved, and inspired by this episode in any way, consider leaving a rating or review wherever you're tuning in, whether you are listening to us on a podcast platform or even watching us on YouTube. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and follow us so we know you're along on the journey. And even better, pay it forward. Share this episode with somebody you think might need this message or could use a really helping hand or ear. And Frank talked a lot about the importance of having different ways to heal, right? Different tools. The more tools you have to be kind to your mind, the better. Well, if you want to learn about havening techniques and let that be a part of your process, whether you are a practitioner, a caregiver, a doctor, if you're just wanting to help in your own home, you can actually get certified in havening techniques, and I can help you do that. I'm not only offering free havening happy hours so you can learn more, you can actually get certified and have me as your guide and your mentor, and I'm going to share all that information on the journey to becoming a practitioner or just learning more about havening in the podcast notes, whether it is wanting to attend a workshop, coming to a havening happy hour, or actually going on the practitioner route. I got you. HIListically Speaking is edited by 2 Market Media with music by Lipbone Redding and, of course, supported by you. So thank you. And I'll leave you with the words that I remember hearing when I was listening to Frank share To Be Loved as I'm tuning in and listening to the book. No matter what you choose, you deserve to be loved. Don't forget that. And on that note, I love you. I believe in you. And I'm sending hugs your way. Be well.
I know that